Very good morning, children. Hope all are doing good. Children, yes, in my last session, I have discussed very clearly about the cyclical changes which has taken place inside the uterus and also in the ovary. The cyclical changes taken place in the ovary and uterus are called what? Menstrual cycle, right? So, today's session, we are going to see about the menstrual cycle or various phases of menstrual cycle in taken place in human female. So, menstrual or ovarian cycle occurs approximately once in every 28 or 29 days during the reproductive life of the female from menarche, that is puberty, to menopause, except during pregnancy. Okay, children, right? So, this is what reproductive changes. It occurs ovarian, see the menstrual cycle or ovarian cycle occurs approximately once in every 28 and 29 days during the reproductive life. This you should keep in your mind. During the reproductive life of female only the menstrual cycle will be taken place. So, okay, what is the reproductive life of the female is from menarche to the menopause. What is menarche? The first puberty is called menarche until the last last flow of the menstruation is called what? Menopause. So, between this phase is called what? Reproductive life. In the reproductive life only the menstrual cycle has taken place, but it is absent during the pregnancy of the female. Then the cycle of events starting from one menstrual period till the next one is called the menstrual cycle, during which cyclical changes occurs in the endometrium every month. Okay. So, listen children, as I said or as I discussed with you in my last session, see there is a cycle of events starting from one menstrual period till the next one is called what? A menstrual cycle, during which cyclical changes occurs in the endometrium every month. So, here they didn't mention about the changes taken place in the ovary. They have said only about the cyclical changes taken place in the endometrium of the uterus. Okay. So, cyclic menstruation is an indicator of normal reproductive phase, right? Then what are the cyclical phases taken place in the normal female is menstrual phase, follicular or proliferative phase, ovulatory phase, luteal or secretory phase are the four phases which has taken place in the female, human female. Okay. Then let's see about the menstrual phase first. How many days it lasts, what happened inside the endometrium, and which hormone responsible for that. All we are going to discuss in each and every phases of menstrual cycle. So, menstrual phase, the cycle start with the menstrual phase when menstrual flow occurs and lasts for 3 to 5 days. Okay. Then menstrual flow is due to the breakdown of endometrial lining of the uterus. Okay, what is menstrual flow? It is a bleeding. It is taken place due to the breakdown of the endometrial lining of the uterus. So, what is endometrium? That is the inner layer of the uterus is called what? Endometrium. So, when the endometrium layer or endometrial lining or peel off or break down, it come as what? Bleeding, and this is called what? Menstrual flow. And then what happened? And it's blood vessels due to decline in the level of progesterone and estrogen. Okay, next question. So, why the endometrium or breakdown? Why the endometrium and related blood vessels or breakdown? Because of the decline the amount of progesterone secreted and estrogen secreted by the corpus luteum. As I said, if there is no fertilization, there won't be formation of corpus luteum, right? If there is no corpus luteum, there is no secretion of progesterone and estrogen. So, that's what. Since there is no fertilization, the corpus luteum converted into corpus albicans and it's declined the secretions of progesterone and estrogen. That the consequence of decline of progesterone, estrogen, what happened? See, bleeding. That is endometrium getting loose and break down, and associated blood vessels also break down and come out as what? Bleeding. And this is what? Menstrual flow. Menstruation occurs only if the released ovum is not fertilized. So, there, see, once in a in a menstrual cycle, the 14th day of menstrual cycle, the ovulation taken place. I said what is mean by ovulation? Rupture of ovarian follicle and release of egg is called what? Ovulation. So when the ovum is released from the ovarian follicle, the ovum if get fertilized, it happened. Okay, so the endometrium getting strong. If the ovum is not fertilized, what happened? That menstruation taken place. Absence of menstruation may be an indicator of pregnancy. However, it could also be due to stress, hormonal disorder and anemia. And next phase, okay, follicular phase, it will last for how many days? 2 to 5 days, 3 to 5 days. Next one is follicular or proliferative phase. What does mean by follicular or proliferative days? How many days last for that? What are the changes taken place in the endometrium and which hormone is responsible for this? We are going to see now. The follicular phase extends from the 5th day of the cycle until the time of ovulation. You know, I said the ovulation taken place by the day of 14, isn't it? So the follicular phase extends from the 5th day of the cycle until the time of ovulation. During this phase, the primary follicle in the ovary grows to become a fully mature Graafian follicle, and simultaneously the endometrium regenerate through the proliferation. Okay, so these changes in the ovary and the uterus are induced by the secretion of gonadotrophins like a follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which increase gradually during the follicular phase. It stimulates follicular development and secretion of estrogen by the follicle cells. Okay, so the follicular phase extends from the 5th day of the cycle until the time of ovulation. Okay, so what happened during this phase? Primary follicle in the ovary so grows to become fully mature Graafian follicle, and simultaneously endometrium regenerate through proliferation. These are the changes taken place in the ovary and uterus. In the ovary, the primary follicle become fully mature Graafian follicle and release ovum and get ready to release ovum. In the endometrium, the field of endometrium get regenerate and proliferate. Since the endometrium proliferate in the stage is called as what? Proliferative stage or proliferative phase. Why it is called follicular phase? Because of the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone released from the pituitary gland, anterior pituitary gland, which is increase the size of the Graafian, primary Graafian follicle size. So that's what it is called as what? Follicular phase. So since in the ovary, the primary follicles become fully matured and get ready to release ovum. So this is what cyclical changes taken place in the ovary, and it is called follicular phase. And inside the uterus, endometrium, it started to regenerate. Already it peeled off during menstruation. So now there is no endometrium in the uterus. Now the endometrium again regenerate by proliferation. So this is called what? Proliferative phase. This was influenced by a hormone called follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, which increase gradually during the follicular phase. It stimulates the follicular development and the secretion of estrogen by the follicular cells. Right. Next, ovulatory phase. Ovulatory phase, you know very well, that is rupture of Graafian follicle and release ovum into the fallopian tube is called what? Ovulation. And this phase is called what? Ovulatory phase. When it is taken place, the 14th day of menstrual cycle, this ovulation phase is taken place. So which hormone involved in it? Luteinizing hormone and the FSH hormone, both are influence these stages. So when FSH and follicle stimulating, that is FSH and LH, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone is attain a peak and level until it leads to the rupture of Graafian follicle and release the ovum, and this is called what? Ovulatory phase. Right. Okay, see, come to the text. Both LH and FSH attain peak level in the middle of the cycle. Maximum secretion of LH during the mid cycle called LH surge induce the rupture of Graafian follicle and release of the ovum, that is secondary oocyte, from the ovary wall into the peritoneal cavity. This process is called ovulation. And luteal or secretory phase, this is the last phase of the menstrual cycle. During luteal phase, ovum is released from the ovarian follicle. What is the next stage? The luteal or secretory phase. During luteal phase, the remaining part of the Graafian follicle is transferred into a transitory endocrine gland called corpus luteum. The corpus luteum secretes a large amount of progesterone, which is essential for the maintenance of the endometrium. If fertilization takes place, it paves a ways for the implantation of the fertilized ovum. The uterine wall secretes nutritious fluid in the uterus for the fetus. So this phase is also called what? Secretory phase. Why luteinizing phase is called a secretory phase? It is nothing but, see, when fertilization takes ovulatory phase, the ovum released into the peritoneal cavity and enter into the fallopian tube. In the fallopian tube, when the egg meet the sperm, fertilization taken place. So when fertilization taken place, corpus luteum converted into the empty Graafian follicle converted into corpus luteum. Corpus luteum started to secrete water, the hormone progesterone and estrogen. These hormones prepare the endometrium to receive the fertilized egg. Okay, so this what the changes taken place in the case of fertilization. If does not taken place the fertilization, what happened? Corpus luteum cannot converted into Graafian follicle cannot converted into corpus luteum, and then what happened? Automatically the corpus luteum converted into scar tissue, corpus albigans. Then endometrium loosen, breakdown. This what a cyclical changes going on in the uterus of the female. So another one is why the luteal phase is called as what a secretory phase. So when in case of fertilization, the embryo get implanted in the endometrium and the uterine wall secrete a nutritious fluid for the developing fetus. So this phase is called what? Secretory phase. During pregnancy, all events of menstrual cycle stop and there is no menstruation. In the absence of fertilization, the corpus luteum degenerates completely and leaves a scar tissue called corpus albigans. It also initiates the disintegration of the endometrium, leading to menstruation, marking the next cycle. Okay. What is mean by polycystic ovary syndrome? Go through, children. Next, menstrual hygiene also you can learn by yourself, children. Menopause also, now directly I am coming for another topic, fertilization and implantation, right? So you know very well what is mean by fertilization. Fertilization occurs when a haploid sperm fuse with the haploid ovum to form a fertilized egg or diploid zygote. This is what fertilization. So fertilization is nothing but fusion of haploid sperm with the haploid ovum and forming a fertilized egg or diploid zygote. This is what fertilization. Next, the sperms deposited in the female reproductive tract undergo capacitation, which is a biochemical event that enables the sperm to penetrate and fertilize the egg. What is mean by capacitation? 2 mark question. So it is a biochemical event through which the sperm can get the capacity to penetrate and fertilize the egg, and this process is called what? Capacitation. Fertilization occurs only if the ovum and the sperms are transported simultaneously to the ampullary isthmic junction of the fallopian tube. You know, children, so to get fertilization, the sperm and ovum which are transported simultaneously to the ampullary region of the isthmus in fallopian tube. Before a sperm can enter the egg, it must penetrate the multiple layers of granulosa cells which are around the ovum, forming the corona radiata. The follicular cells are held together by adhesive cementing substance called hyaluronic acid. The agrosomal membrane disintegrates, releasing the proteolytic enzyme hyaluronidase during sperm entry through the corona radiata and zona pellucida. This is called what? Acrosomal reaction. Next one is what? Acrosomal reaction. 3 mark question. Or what happened once the egg touched the sperm? Okay, write the consequence of acrosomal reaction. These all you will get as a 3 mark question, children. So before a sperm can enter in egg, it must penetrate the multiple layers of granulosa cells. Children, egg is protected already we studied about the structure of egg. So egg is covered by 3 membrane. So the egg which is immediately covered by the cell membrane of egg is plasma vitelline membrane. Over the vitelline membrane, zona pellucida, and the outermost layer is called corona radiata. This corona radiata are made up of follicular cells. This corona radiata and zona pellucida, which are held with vitelline membrane by a adhesive substance, cementing substance called hyaluronic acid. Okay, so if the sperm want to reach the egg nucleus, it should dissolve the cementing substance of hyaluronic acid. Once the hyaluronic acid getting dissolved only, the follicular cells of corona radiata and zona pellucida getting loosed. So when it gets loosed, the sperm penetrate the egg and get fertilization. Okay, so before a sperm can enter the egg, it must penetrate the multiple layers of the granulosa cells which are around the ovum, forming the corona radiata. Next, the follicular cells are held together by the adhesive cementing substance and called as what? Hyaluronic acid. Next, the agrosomal membrane disintegrate, releasing the proteolytic enzyme called hyaluronidase during sperm entry through the corona radiata and zona pellucida. This is called what? Acrosomal reaction. This is 3-mark question, children. Mark it. Once fertilization is accomplished, cortical granules from the cytoplasm of the ovum form a barrier called fertilization membrane around the ovum, preventing further penetration of the other sperm. Thus, polyspermy is prevented. It's a book back question. How polyspermy in human prevented, okay, or avoided, or what is polyspermy? All different kinds of questions. For all these questions, this is the same answer. Once fertilization is accomplished, that means what? Once the sperm dissolve the follicular cells, zona pellucida and corona radiata, and it reach the egg and fuse with the egg, the sperm nucleus fuse with the egg nucleus. It is called what? Fertilization. So once the fertilization accomplished, what is the next consequence? Inside the egg cytoplasm, there is a granules. These granular cells form a membrane called fertilization membrane. This fertilization membrane, which is a barrier to entry of other sperm into the egg cell and which avoid the polyspermy, right? The first cleavage produces 2 identical cells called blastomeres. Okay, children. So now fertilization taken place. That is 2 haploid gametes fused together form a zygote. The zygote is a single cell stage but diploid in nature. Now this zygote undergo what? Mitotic cell division. Mitotic cell division, you know very well, one cell divide into 2 with the same number of chromosome. Both the cells have same number of chromosome. So now the zygote undergoes mitotic cell division and form 2 cells. 2 cells divide into 4 to 8, like that it is going on. The first cleavage produces 2 identical daughter cells called blastomeres. Okay, the first cleavage produces 2 identical cells called blastomere. Okay, zygote undergo cell division. Zygote undergo cell division and produce 2 identical cells called blastomeres. Next, these 2 blastomeres undergo mitotic cell division and produce 4 cells. 4 cells then to 8 cells and so on. After 72 hours of fertilization, a loose collection of cells form a berry-shaped clusters of 16 or more cells called the morula. So what happens? Okay, after 72 hours of fertilization, a loose connection of cells form a berry-shaped clusters of 16 or more cells called morula stage is formed. Under the influence of progesterone, smooth muscle of the fallopian tube relax and a dividing embryo takes place 4 to 5 days to move through the fallopian tube into the uterine cavity and finally gets implanted in the uterine wall. So under the influence of progesterone, smooth muscle of the fallopian tube. Why? Because the fertilization taken place in the fallopian tube only. Okay, right. So in the fallopian tube, the single celled zygote is started to dividing 2, 4, 8, 16 like that and form a group of cells called morula. So to this size will be increased, the size will be increase. So to accommodate this size inside the fallopian tube, the fallopian tube should be dilated. So this is happened due to the relaxation of smooth muscles inside the fallopian tube. The relaxation of smooth muscle inside the fallopian tube gets dilated the fallopian tube to accommodate the increased size of embryo inside it. So the embryo stayed in 4 to 5 days in the fallopian tube and it entered into the uterine and implanted in the uterine wall. At this point, the embryo consists of a fluid-filled hollow ball of about 100 cells called the blastocyst. When the embryo reach the uterine wall, it consists of a ball of cells consist of 100 cells. That is called what? Blastocyst. It is filled with a fluid also. In this stage, the blastocyst filled with fluid. The blastocyst is composed of a single layer of large flattened cells called trophoblast and a smaller clusters of 20 to 30 rounded cells called the inner cell mass. The inner cell mass of blastocyst develop into embryo and becomes embedded in the endometrium of the uterus. Okay, describe the structure of blastocyst you will have as one 2 mark question. Okay, the answer for this question is what? The blastocyst, it is embryonal stage, implant into the uterus, consists of 100 cells plus, and the blastocyst regarding structure of blastocyst, it is covered by a single layer of flattened cells called tonoplast. Inside the tonoplast, 20 to 30 round shaped cells are present. This is called the innermost cells. The innermost cells of the blastocyst only develop into embryo and becomes embedded in the endometrium of the uterus, right? See children, events of fertilization. This is one 5 mark question also you can have. With this diagram, please see the consequence. What are the consequences taken place during the fertilization or events of fertilization? 5 mark questions. Okay, go through it. Next, so the implantation is called implantation and is result in the pregnancy. If the fertilized ovum is implanted outside the uterus, it result in ectopic pregnancy. About 95% of ectopic pregnancy occurs in the fallopian tube. The growth of the embryo may cause internal bleeding, infection and in some cases even death due to rupture of fallopian tube. Okay. So, what is the next thing children? Okay, fertilization taken place, the embryo get attached in the uterine wall and this process is called implantation. After implantation, this embryo started to develop into a fetus. Okay, right. Okay. So, if the fertilization taken place outside the uterus, then it is called ectopic pregnancy. So, about 95% of pregnancy occur in the fallopian tube only. The growth of embryo may cause internal bleeding, infection and in some cases even death due to rupture of the fallopian tube has taken place. Okay children. So, the next topic is what? Maintenance of pregnancy and embryonic development. This I will discuss with you in my next class. So, the homework for you children, explain the only one question I want to give to you. Explain the various phases of menstrual cycle with a diagram. This is what only one question you will get as a homework. Okay children. I will meet you in my next session. Bye.